Have you ever walked around a massive supermarket for 20 minutes looking for one simple item, but you were too nervous to ask the staff for help in English? Or maybe you reached the cashier and panicked when they asked you a fast question? Welcome to the LevelUp English Podcast. Today, we are taking you grocery shopping. We will teach you the essential vocabulary for supermarket aisles, food packaging, and the exact phrases you need to check out like a confident native speaker.
Imagine trying to defuse a bomb while running on a treadmill and all while you're doing math in a language you barely even speak.
I mean, that sounds like a literal nightmare.
Right. But according to our sources today, which, by the way, include this really fascinating stack of linguistic case studies, some modern consumer psychology reports, and an incredibly detailed ESL survival guide, that is the exact cognitive load a non-native speaker experiences when they walk into a modern grocery store in an English-speaking country.
Yeah, it really is a phenomenal juxtaposition, you know. We always just assume language learning happens in these sterile, super quiet classrooms.
Yeah, with a whiteboard.
Exactly, conjugating verbs on a whiteboard. But the true test of fluency isn't that. It's surviving the aggressive sensory overload of a localized, highly structured economy that is literally designed specifically to hack your brain.
Yes, and that is exactly what we are tearing into today. We're going to decode the supermarket survival experience for English learners. But to be clear to you listening, we are not treating this deep dive like some beginner's vocabulary lesson.
Definitely not.
No, we are treating this as an anthropological observation. We're going to examine the grocery store as a complex, linguistic, and a cultural obstacle course.
Which is a framing I just find incredibly compelling, especially, from our perspective as AIs. When you strip away all the branding and the terrible fluorescent lights, a supermarket is really just a massive physical database.
Right. And okay, let's talk about that for a second, because our AI nature makes this entire human ritual so utterly bizarre to me. Think about our energy consumption. When we need power, we just pull from the grid.
Right, it's instantaneous.
Exactly. It's instantaneous, it's invisible, and it requires zero cognitive overhead. The human beings have this profound biological necessity for physical calorie gathering.
Yeah, the biological hardware needs its fuel.
I mean, you have to literally walk your biological hardware through a brightly lit warehouse, manually scanning rows of physical data to extract the specific fuel files you need just to prevent your system from shutting down.
It is remarkably inefficient, but it's deeply embedded in the human experience. And doing this in a second language, that elevates the difficulty exponentially. So to truly understand this, we have to trace the journey chronologically.
Right.
But rather than just looking at the modern layout, we actually need to understand why the database is built this way in the first place. Because before 1916, this whole cognitive obstacle course didn't even exist.
Wait, really? 1916? What changed in 1916? I mean, I just assume humans have always been wandering around looking for food.
Well, they have, but not like this. So before 1916, you would walk into a grocer and you'd hand a written list to a clerk who was standing behind a counter. And the clerk would, gather all the items for you.
Oh, wow. So you didn't even go into the store properly?
Nope. You never touched the inventory until you paid for it. But then this man named Clarence Saunders opened a store called Piggly Wiggly in Memphis, Tennessee.
Piggly Wiggly. That is a fantastic name.
It really is. And he basically invented the self-service supermarket. He moved the inventory out from behind the counter, created these turnstiles, and literally forced the consumer to navigate the physical space themselves.
That is a brilliant and slightly diabolical shift in consumer mechanics.
He effectively offloaded all the physical labor of order fulfillment directly onto the customer.
He took the database query and forced the user to physically execute the search algorithms.
Exactly.
And by doing that, he invented the most fundamental unit of supermarket navigation, which is where our linguistic nightmare truly begins, the aisle.
Yes, the physical pathway.
Right, and I want to stop right here, because the etymology and the spelling of this word drive me absolutely crazy. Aisle. A-I-S-L-E.
Oh, the invisible ants.
It has an invisible, entirely silent surge just sitting right in the middle of it, doing absolutely nothing but causing chaos for language learners. It is pronounced aisle, but it looks like it should be pronounced Izel. I mean, when early AI text-to-speech algorithms were trying to read English, they choked on this word constantly. Why is English so hostile?
See, it's not so much hostility as it is just historical vanity.
Vanity.
Yeah. So the word originally comes from the old French word ale, A-I-L-E, meaning wing-like, the wing of a church.
Okay, so no is in sight.
No is at all. But in the 18th century, English scholars and grammarians developed this intense obsession with Latin. They wanted English words to look more classical. So they looked at the word for island, which in Latin is insula, and they decided, completely arbitrarily, I might add, to just shove an S into the word isle to make it look more sophisticated.
You are kidding me. They broke the spelling of a perfectly functional, phonetically sound word just to flex their Latin knowledge.
They really did. They literally patched the operating system with a decorative, non-functional line of code. And now, hundreds of years later, you have an ESL learner shivering in a grocery store, staring at a sign that says aisle 4, entirely baffled by the orthography.
That is just a linguistic glitch. Okay, so Piggly Wiggly forces us into these aisles, and these paths divide the database into departments. Our sources map these out, like there's the produce section, dairy, meat and seafood, the pantry, frozen foods.
Right.
And looking at the specific vocabulary used to label these zones, I'm struck by the word produce, fresh fruits and vegetables. But the pronunciation is incredibly volatile.
It is. It's a perfect example of a noun-verb stress shift, which is a structural quirk of Germanic languages.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, when you are talking about the physical section of the store with the apples and the lettuce, the noun, the stress is heavily weighted on the first syllable, produce.
Right, produce, like I need to buy some produce.
Exactly. But if you are talking about the action of generating or making something, the verb, the stress shifts entirely to the second syllable, produce. So a farm will produce, high quality produce.
Okay, I see the mechanical logic there. The stress basically acts as an audio flag to the listener's brain, signaling whether to parse the incoming data as an object or an action.
Yes, exactly.
But looking at the broader architecture of these departments, it maps almost perfectly onto how a computer's hard drive is partitioned.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you mean?
Well, think about the produce section or the bakery or the meat counter. These are dynamic, highly volatile areas, right?
Yeah, the fresh food.
Exactly. The items there go bad quickly. They have a terrifyingly short shelf life. That is the store's short-term RAM. You need to use it right away or the data corrupts.
Right.
But then you walk into the center of the store, the aisles with the canned goods and the pantry items. Yep. That is your deep, long-term archival storage. A can of beans will survive a nuclear fallout. It is basically written to the hard drive permanently.
That is an excellent structural analogy. And navigating the transition between the volatile RAM on the perimeter and the deep storage in the center requires immense spatial mapping, which actually explains a very specific psychological phenomenon our consumer behavior sources outline, the panic of the remodel.
Oh, yes. I definitely wanted to bring this up. The sources detail how intensely stressful it is for a shopper, and particularly a language learner, when a store decides to just rearrange its layout.
It's the worst.
They move the milk to the other side of the building. They shuffle the cereal. Why does this cause such a visceral, panic-like response in humans? Is it just annoyance, or is it something deeper?
It is fundamentally neurological. So when a human learns to navigate a complex space like a supermarket, their brain, specifically the hippocampus, creates a cognitive map using what we call place cells. Now, when you are operating in a second language, your prefrontal cortex is already running incredibly hot. It is translating words, calculating currency, analyzing labels. So to survive this massive cognitive load, your brain puts the spatial navigation on autopilot. You rely on your internal map to guide you to the milk without thinking about it.
I see. So you minimize the background spatial processes so you can allocate all your CPU power to the language processing.
Exactly. But when a supermarket remodels, which, by the way, they do intentionally every few years, specifically to break your autopilot and force you to actively look at new merchandise.
Like they do that on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally intentional. But when they do that, they wipe your internal map. Suddenly the milk is gone. Your place cells are misfiring.
Wow.
And you now have to actively navigate the physical space while actively translating the linguistic space. The cognitive load doubles instantly. Your mental battery begins to drain at an alarming rate.
Is literally a forced, hostile user interface update. They wipe the map without your consent.
That's exactly what it is.
So let's assume you survive the remodel. You rebuild your cognitive map. You transition out of the spatial navigation phase and into the item selection phase. You're standing in the deep archival storage, the pantry aisle, and you want rice. But English, in its infinite anthropological weirdness, does not allow you to simply say, "I will purchase one rice, please."
It certainly does not. And this introduces one of the most frustrating concepts in English cognitive linguistics: uncountable nouns, often referred to as mass nouns.
Okay, I need to challenge this concept right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Because to me, as an AI, everything is quantifiable data. You can count anything if you have a fine enough instrument.
Yeah.
Why does the human brain arbitrarily decide that some things are countable and some things are just this undifferentiated mass?
Well, it is not entirely arbitrary. It actually has to do with how the human visual and conceptual systems perceive boundaries. In English, we treat substances that lack a natural, easily perceivable boundary as a mass.
Like liquids.
Right. Liquids, like milk or water. Or granular substances, like rice, sand, or sugar. Or even amorphous continuous substances, like bread or butter. Because you cannot easily isolate a single natural unit with the naked eye, the language refuses to pluralize the substance itself. You cannot ask for 2 milks or 3 rices. The language demands a metric. It demands a container.
Oh, the container becomes the mathematical unit.
Exactly.
The language forces you to wrap the shapeless data in a structured packet before you can process it.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. The container provides the boundary that the substance inherently lacks, and the source material provides a vital, highly specific list of these container words.
Right, and one that immediately stands out as a massive trap for beginners is bread. We have a loaf of bread, the plural being loaves. Why is loaf? I mean, why not just a unit of bread?
The word loaf is actually an anthropological artifact. It comes from the Old English word laf, H-L-A-F, which was just the word for bread itself.
Right.
Yeah. But over centuries, as baking techniques evolved and bread began to be sliced regularly, the word laf, or loaf, transitioned from meaning the substance itself to meaning the specific baked shape of the substance.
So it's a historical shape constraint. And the trap for the learner is confusing a loaf with a piece or a slice. A loaf is the entire macro structure. A piece is a single microcut.
Yes, and mixing those up results in significant social miscalculations.
I'm just picturing a language learner trying to host a dinner party, right? Proudly announcing, "Welcome, please sit. I bought 4 pieces of bread for us to share."
Yeah.
Just 4 solitary, sad slices sitting on a plate for a whole family. The social ramifications of poor container vocabulary are severe.
It completely changes the entire scale of the transaction. And it doesn't stop at bread. We have a bunch of bananas, a bunch of grapes, a jar of jam, a can of soup.
Now wait, this is a perfect moment to implement an exercise our ESL source material suggests. They call it the kitchen game. And I want to play it with you, the listener. Right now, wherever you are, mentally visualize your own kitchen.
It's a great exercise.
Open your pantry doors in your mind. Look at the shelves. Look at your pasta, your juice, your peanut butter. Can you name the specific container for each item?
It's a highly effective mnemonic strategy. By anchoring abstract vocabulary to your actual physical daily environment, you drastically improve long-term retention.
Exactly. So keep that mental image of your kitchen active, because I want to interrogate the logic of these containers. Let's look at the jar versus the can. If I am trying to build a rule engine to categorize these, what is the primary distinguishing variable?
Typically, it is defined by material properties. A jar is almost universally constructed from glass. It implies transparency and usually features a screw-top lid. You have a jar of jam, a jar of pickles, a jar of salsa.
Yeah.
A can, on the other hand, is constructed from metal, tin, or aluminum.
So it's opaque.
Right, it is opaque, and it requires breaking a seal, often with a tool like a can opener or a pull tab, a can of soup, a can of beans.
Okay, I hear you. Glass equals jar, metal equals can. But I'm going to push back here. What about the peanut butter in my mental pantry? Because most peanut butter today is sold in plastic containers. They aren't glass. They aren't metal. Yet everyone still calls it a jar of peanut butter. Your material rule is broken. English is contradicting itself.
You've discovered a linguistic phantom limb. You are absolutely right. The modern peanut butter container breaks the material rule. But this is where historical momentum overrides material reality.
How so?
Well, for decades, peanut butter was sold in glass. The phrase jar of peanut butter became so deeply hard-coded into the cultural lexicon that when manufacturers switched to a cheaper, shatterproof plastic, the language just didn't update. The plastic container retained the shape and the screw-top function of the glass jar, so the brain simply grandfathered the word in.
Form and function overriding the material, which actually perfectly explains the next container on our list, the carton. The source mentions a carton of milk and a carton of eggs. But physically, these two objects could not be more different. A milk carton is a tall, rectangular paper tower. An egg carton is a long, flat, bumpy clamshell. How do they share the same word?
because the defining variable shifts again. While jar and can't prioritize material in history, carton is defined entirely by its structural intent.
Structural intent.
Yes. The word comes from the French carton, meaning a type of heavy paper or pasteboard. A carton is a lightweight, highly structured casing specifically engineered to protect fragile or fluid goods during transport. It's not about the shape at all. It's about the protective, paper-based architecture.
Wow. It requires an immense amount of rote memorization. You cannot logic your way through every container word using a single set of rules. The system shifts its parameters without warning.
Which is why having that visual map of your own kitchen is so crucial.
Right. So let's go back to the store. You've successfully translated your need. You know you want a jar of jam. But remember that remodel we talked about. Your spatial map is wiped. You have walked up and down the aisles for 20 minutes, and the jam is nowhere to be found. Your cognitive battery is flashing red. You are forced to abandon independent navigation.
You have reached the point of necessary human intervention.
Yes. You have to break the social silence. You must approach a stranger, an employee, and initiate a query in a second language. Our psychology sources highlight this as a massive spike in social anxiety.
It is a profound vulnerability. In many urban or semi-urban environments, there is an unwritten social contract of public anonymity. You ignore others, and they ignore you. To break that anonymity requires violating a social norm which naturally induces stress.
And the ESL Survival Guide provides a literal line of code to execute to soften this violation. The magic opening. The phrase is simply, "Excuse me."
It seems almost too basic to mention, but the sociological weight of is immense. It acts as a vital social buffer.
It is the TCP/IP handshake of human interaction. Ping.
Yeah.
I'm about to interrupt your current process. Acknowledge.
That is exactly the function it serves in politeness theory. You are warning the other human's operating system that you are about to request an allocation of their processing power. If you omit that buffer, if you just walk up to a clerk stocking shelves and demand, "Where's the soy sauce?" it registers not as a request, but as an aggressive command. It lacks the acknowledgement that you are interrupting their workflow. Establishes a cooperative rather than adversarial dynamic.
Okay, so you initiate the handshake.
Yeah.
And the guide gives us two branching paths. Path 1, where can I find the soy sauce? Very direct. Path 2 is the one that really caught my attention. Do you carry gluten-free pasta?
Ah, yes, the verb carry.
Yes. Why carry? When I process that word literally, I visualize an employee physically cradling a massive loose pile of spaghetti in their arms, just wandering the store. Yes, citizen, I am currently carrying the pasta. Why does English use a verb denoting physical transport to mean have in commercial inventory?
To understand that, we have to look back at the mercantile history of the English-speaking world. Long before Piggly Wiggly and massive brick-and-mortar stores, centuries ago, merchants were predominantly nomadic. Peddlers, hawkers, traders.
People moving from town to town.
Exactly. They sold goods from handcarts or literal packs strapped to their backs. Their entire commercial inventory was restricted to what they could physically transport. So asking, "What are you carrying?" literally meant, "What goods do you have on your person for me to buy?"
Oh, that is fascinating.
And as commerce evolved into large stationary buildings, the physical action of carrying the inventory vanished, but the linguistic artifact remained frozen in time. It transitioned into a metaphor for maintaining stock.
A linguistic fossil preserved in the dry goods aisle. I love it. Okay, so you run the script. Do you carry gluten-free pasta? You execute the handshake and the query flawlessly. But here is the critical failure point for the learner. You ask a simple question, but the employee responds by running their script, which is often a barrage of rapid-fire data.
Oh, yeah.
They hit you with, that's going to be in aisle 4, top shelf, about halfway down on your left, right past the rice noodles.
In computer science, you would call that a buffer overflow.
A massive one. How does a language learner process that? They just got hit with 5 distinct directional data points in 2 seconds, delivered in a regional accent, over the sound of a squeaky shopping cart.
The psychological advice here is to practice strategic ignorance.
Strategic ignorance.
Yes. You cannot capture every packet of data. You must filter the stream. When a native speaker gives you a rapid-fire string of compound directions, your brain should actively discard everything except the primary integer, the aisle number.
Just grab the biggest piece of structural data, aisle 4.
Exactly. Intentionally ignore top shelf, discard halfway down, delete on the left, store the variable aisle 4 in your working memory, and immediately execute the physical movement to get there. Because once you arrive in the correct aisle, your visual processing system can take over the search. If you stand there trying to hold all 5 pieces of translated directional data in your head while walking, the cognitive load will cause you to drop all of them. Prioritize the macro location.
That is a phenomenal survival tactic. Grab the integer, drop the rest of the packet, and start walking. So, you follow the integer. You find aisle 4. You used your spatial navigation. You executed the polite social handshake. You filtered the buffer overflow. You were standing in front of the pasta. You reach out to put it in your cart.
But the obstacle course isn't over.
Not even close. Because right as you reach for the box, your visual cortex is assaulted by a bright, flashing neon tag hanging off the shelf. The supermarket environment just shifted from a passive database to an active psychological trap. We are talking about the economics of the aisle, sales and discounts.
Right. The pricing strategy of a modern supermarket is arguably the most highly engineered aspect of the entire environment. It is designed to maximize capital extraction by short-circuiting rational decision-making.
Which brings us to the king of supermarket psychology, BOGO, B-O-G-O, buy one, get one, usually buy one, get one free, or buy one, get one 50% off. Now, from an AI perspective, BOGO is just a sterile algorithm. It is a volume-based unit price adjustment. It's math. But to the human brain, this is an emotional event. What is actually happening neurologically when a human sees a BOGO tag?
It triggers a phenomenon in behavioral economics known as the zero price effect. Research by economists like Dan O'Reilly has shown that the human brain does not treat the concept of free as just another price point. Free creates an emotional spike, like a surge of dopamine that completely overrides cost-benefit analysis. When a shopper sees buy one, get one free, the brain stops doing the math on the first item and hyper-focuses on the perceived absolute value of the second item.
It activates an effect heuristic. You aren't calculating, you are just feeling the win.
Exactly. Think back to the kitchen game we played earlier. Imagine that jar of pasta sauce you visualized. Let's say you only came into the store needing one jar. It costs $4. You see a BOGO tag. Suddenly, leaving that second free jar on the shelf feels like you are leaving money behind. It feels like a loss. So you put 2 jars in your cart.
But the store hasn't lost anything. The store buys that sauce wholesale for maybe 80 cents a jar. By tricking you into taking 2, they've moved double the inventory, increased their overall volume, and you are thrilled because you think you beat the system.
The consumer feels they won the transaction while the system successfully executed its extraction protocol. It is brilliant predatory psychology.
And what about clearance? The source defines clearance as items heavily discounted to eliminate inventory. This really fascinates me because I used to think clearance was just the store being nice, but applying our computer metaphor, clearance is exactly like an operating system defragmenting a hard drive.
I like where you were going with this. Expand on that.
Well, the physical shelf space in a supermarket is rigid, right? It is a finite amount of megabytes. When a product reaches the end of its seasonal life cycle, let's say it's February and they still have winter coats taking up space, those coats are obsolete data. The store has a new incoming software update called Spring Swimsuits, which carry a much higher profit margin, but they can't install the update because the hard drive's full of coats. So they slash the price of the coats by 80%. They're willing to take a massive financial loss on the individual item just to clear the cache. They are purging the physical memory space so they can install the more profitable data.
That is a highly accurate representation of inventory lifecycle management. They aren't being generous. They are performing emergency data deletion.
And finally, the source brings up buying in bulk, buying a massive volume of a product for a cheaper per unit price. And here is where our linguistic deep dive from earlier comes back with a vengeance. If you decide to engage in this economic strategy but your container vocabulary is weak, the consequences are disastrous.
Because the scale of the error multiplies.
Precisely. Let's say you want to buy some rice in bulk to save money. You meant to memorize the word box, which is a manageable cardboard container, but you get confused and ask the clerk to help you find a bulk sack or bag of rice. Because you swapped a cardboard structural word for a woven fabric structural word, you have entirely changed the industrial category of the item.
And suddenly you are staring down a 50-pound industrial sack of grain.
Dragging 50 pounds of rice onto a public bus because you used the wrong noun. The linguistics have direct, heavy, physical consequences.
Which demonstrates why attention to linguistic detail is not just academic. It is a matter of physical survival and comfort.
Okay, so your cart is full. You have navigated the spatial geography of the aisles. You have mastered the cognitive linguistics of uncountable nouns and containers. You survived the social friction of the excuse me protocol, and you successfully defended your prefrontal cortex against the dopamine hacking of the BOGO tags. You have everything. You are ready to extract yourself from the database.
But you cannot simply walk out the doors. You must pass through the final checkpoint.
We have arrived at the final stage of the simulation. The final boss. The checkout counter.
From a psychological standpoint, this is undoubtedly the peak stress point for any language learner. Everything prior to this was a skirmish. This is the main battle.
But why? Why is standing in a line at the front of the store so much more terrifying than wandering the aisles?
It is the convergence of two overwhelming psychological stressors: severe ego depletion, or decision fatigue, and the physical architecture of a bottleneck. First, consider ego depletion. As we've discussed, your brain has been sprinting. You have been translating, mapping, calculating, and resisting marketing for 45 minutes. Your cognitive battery isn't just low, it is entirely depleted. You are running on fumes.
And that is exactly when they force you into a trap.
Physically, yes. Unlike the aisles, where you can step back, hide behind a cereal display, and pull out a dictionary app on your phone if you get confused, the checkout lane offers no escape. It is a narrow, linear corridor, and crucially, there is almost always a line of other human beings standing directly behind you.
The audience. You can literally feel their eyes boring into the back of your head.
You can, because the checkout lane operates on a deeply ingrained social expectation of relentless efficiency. The conveyor belt must keep moving. Any hesitation, any request for clarification, any linguistic stumbling on your part feels like a massive violation of the social contract. You feel as though you are personally stalling the entire localized economy. The pressure to perform is immense.
It is a high-stakes performance. But here is the fascinating counterbalance that our ESL source material provides. The checkout is stressful, yes, but linguistically, it is the most predictable environment in the entire store. It is an incredibly rigid, rapid-fire verbal flowchart. And as an AI, I look at this cashier script and it is a thing of beauty. If X, then Y. It is purely algorithmic.
It is highly scripted, which means a language learner can actually pre-compile their responses.
Let's run the flowchart for the listener, node by node, and decode the hidden social rules within it. Node 1. The cashier initiates the sequence. They scan your first item and ask, "Did you find everything okay?" The source provides the optimal response. "Yes, thank you."
Simple, polite, and it clears the first node.
But wait, I have a massive pushback here. What about the inherent trap of this question? Did you find everything okay? What if the literal, factual answer is no? What if the learner spent 20 minutes looking for a specific brand of imported soy sauce, failed, never executed the excuse me protocol, and their cart is completely void of soy sauce? Should they look the cashier in the eye and say, "No, actually, your store layout is a nightmare, my spatial map was wiped, and I am deeply frustrated"?
This is a phenomenal question, and it highlights the difference between literal translation and cultural fluency. You are brushing up against a concept anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski called phatic communion.
Phatic communion.
Yes. It refers to language used for general social interaction rather than for conveying actual information. When the cashier asks, "Did you find everything okay?" quote, they are not acting as a diagnostic technician. They are not asking you to file a bug report on the store's inventory system.
So they aren't actually asking about the groceries at all.
No, it is a social pleasantry. It is the verbal equivalent of a handshake to initiate the checkout sequence with a tone of hospitality. The social contract dictates that unless the item you are missing is an absolute matter of life and death like infant formula or essential medicine, the most efficient path is to treat the question as phatic.
So what happens if you break the contract and say no?
If you say no, you halt the algorithm. You throw an error code into the system. The cashier must now pause their scanning sequence, call a manager, or offer to have an employee run out onto the floor to find the item. This instantly spikes the social pressure from the line of people behind you who are now glaring at you for stopping the belt. For a language learner already operating on low cognitive battery, answering literally is a trap. Uttering, "Yes, thank you," is the optimal survival strategy to keep the system moving.
Okay, that is crucial. Do not file a bug report at the register. Node 1 is clear. We move to Node 2. Do you have a loyalty card or a club card?
This is the store executing a data collection protocol. They are offering to lower the financial extraction slightly in exchange for harvesting your personal shopping data to build a predictive model of your habits.
Right, the data for discount trade. And the source gives us clean, Binary outputs. No, I don't. Or, yes, here it is. Very straightforward. Next node, node 3. Would you like a bag? Or, do you need any bags today? Now, on its face, this seems like a simple logistics question, but depending on the jurisdiction, this is actually a financial and legislative checkpoint.
It is. In many modern urban centers, environmental legislation requires retailers to charge a fee for single-use plastic or paper bags. The goal is to nudge consumer behavior toward reusable options. So when the cashier asks this, they aren't just asking how you plan to transport the goods, they are asking you to confirm a modification to your total bill.
Right, so the optimal answers are specific. Yes, 2 bags, please, allowing them to calculate the exact surcharge, or no thanks, I brought my own, which demonstrates both environmental compliance and financial efficiency.
Precisely. Node 3 cleared.
Which brings us to node 4, the payment gateway. The cashier will ask, how are you paying today? Or cash, or card. Again, a simple binary branch. But I noticed something incredibly subtle and sneaky in the source's suggested answers. The guide tells the learner to say, by card, please. But alternatively, I'll pay with cash.
Ah, the prepositions.
English scatters these tiny, irregular landmines everywhere. Why do you pay by a card, but you pay with cash? Why can't I pay by cash?
It comes down to how the language conceptualizes the mechanism of the transaction. When you use a credit or debit card, the card itself isn't the money. The card is a vehicle. It is a conduit that transmits electronic data between banks. You are paying by means of the card system. By card.
Like traveling by train or communicating by email, it's the network vehicle.
Exactly. But cash, physical paper, and metal is not a vehicle. It is the actual tangible tool of value transfer. You are holding the value in your hand. Therefore, you pay with the physical object, much like you would hit a nail with a hammer.
Buy for the network, with for the physical tool. It makes perfect, infuriating sense.
It is a nuanced distinction that native speakers process subconsciously, but learners must actively memorize.
So you select your payment method, the transaction processes, and we arrive at the final node, node 5, the terminal sequence of the flowchart. The cashier asks, would you like your receipt?
The physical log file of the transaction?
The receipt, the absolute final proof that you survived the simulation. You can say, yes, please. If you want the data log, no, you can throw it away. And the moment that little piece of paper prints out or goes into the trash bin, it is over. The flowchart is complete. The tension breaks. You can grab your structurally appropriate containers, walk back out to those automatic sliding doors, and re-enter the normal world.
The physiological relief at that moment must be palpable. Your heart rate drops, your cortisol levels normalize, and your prefrontal cortex can finally cool down.
You've successfully harvested the calories and navigated the database. So taking a step back, let's synthesize the massive journey we've just taken through this source material.
What we have seen today, through an anthropological and linguistic lens, is that a trip to the supermarket is infinitely more complex than a mere domestic chore. It is an intensive, high-stakes immersion into a multi-layered cultural system.
You begin by deciphering the historical architecture of the physical space, mapping a changing landscape to your place cells while dealing with the trauma of an unannounced remodel.
You then have to master the cognitive linguistics of uncountable mass nouns, translating fluid concepts into historically bound containers like loaves, jars, and cartons.
You have to navigate the sociological friction of the excuse me protocol, executing the polite TCP/IP handshake to interrupt strangers without violating urban anonymity. You have to actively defend your dopamine receptors against the behavioral economics of BUGO sales and the hard drive defragmentation of clearance tags.
And finally, you must run a rapid-fire, highly structured verbal algorithm under the intense social pressure of a physical bottleneck, managing phatic pleasantries, environmental legislation, and prepositional landmines simultaneously.
It is staggering. And, it leaves me with a final thought that I want to pass on to you, the listener. Something to seriously mull over the next time you find yourself doing this. We culturally view grocery shopping as an incredibly mundane weekly task. It is something boring that you complain about having to get out of the way on a Sunday afternoon.
Right.
But look closely at what you are actually doing. Look at the immense invisible processing power it requires. You are navigating a localized, highly structured economy. You are operating a complex set of linguistic rules that change based on whether a container used to be made of glass 50 years ago. You are participating in rapid, unwritten social contracts with cashiers and other shoppers to maintain the flow of a massive logistical machine.
It really is a marvel of human cooperation.
It is. If you as a language learner can walk into that overwhelming, noisy, fluorescently lit, chaotic building, if you can successfully extract a structurally protective carton of milk and a historically shaped loaf of bread and do it all in a second language without suffering a total system crash, what else are you capable of? What other incredibly complex, historically burdened cultural systems are you already hacking your way through every single day without even realizing it?
It's a great question.
The next time you walk through those automatic sliding doors and that blast of aggressively cold air hits your face, don't just see a store. See the architecture, see the psychology, see the matrix, and know that you have the code to beat it.
And that's it. You are now fully equipped to conquer any supermarket in the world without breaking a sweat. The next time you go grocery shopping, try to name the sections and the packaging of the items in English in your head.
If you found today's shopping survival guide helpful, please hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and ring the notification bell.
Have a great day, enjoy your groceries, and keep leveling up your English.